Hello and welcome back to the Gaelic Football Show here on Off the Ball. Dublin back into winning ways after a win over Roscommon at the weekend. Kerry still top and Sean O'Shea looking like the latest great player coming through there. Joined this week on YouTube, Off the Ball, Facebook by Eoin Sheahan, often-time presenter of Off the Ball AM. How are you doing?
Very well, how are you?
Flying it. And also Colm, Nally, how are you doing?
Not too bad, Shane, thanks.
You're a coach with Meath this year, but you're a Dublin native who once actually played for Dublin. You've also played for 5 years with Louth. And coach of near rivals. Must be a real identity crisis for you.
Well, I often tell the story of when the first time I met the Meath players, I asked them, where do you want me to be from, Louth or Dublin? So I won't tell you what the answers I got.
Because I know that people from Louth absolutely hate people from Meath. I'm not sure, like, you probably look at Dublin, or sorry, Meath probably look at Dublin as the people we really hate, and Louth, you're a smaller county, maybe not quite so, a bit more inconsequential.
Yeah. Well, I live in Drogheda, and part of Drogheda is in County Meath.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Famously, the bridge that was on the crest for Louth's jersey a few years ago, they realised, oh no, we've got a bridge that's actually in Meath on our Louth jersey. We need to change the crest again.
Well, I don't know, Shane, but I do remember the stories being told about black flags being flown when either Louth or Meath got into the All-Ireland final. Now, Louth didn't get into an All-Ireland final since 1957, so I can't really remember which. But yeah, there's a deep hatred there between the two of them.
Did 2010 divide the county even more?
It did,
counties?
Yeah. That's still there. That wound is still very much open, you know. And even in our house now, where my middle son Dara played, was captain of Louth Miners last year. He wasn't impressed at all now that I got involved with me.
You've got a great book out as well, a coaching manual. We're going to do a lot of stuff up the tactics board, talk about tactics with you, but it's called Gaelic Football, Game-Based Training Activities by Colm Nally. It's a great read, so if you're interested in your Gaelic football and your coaching, it's definitely worth picking up. One of the things from the weekend that I wanted to look at was Leitrim. They're finally heading back to Croke Park. The likes of, people always reference Emlyn Mulligan, one of the best players never playing at Croke Park, and now he will get a chance. How important is it for a team like Leitrim to be getting there?
Oh, it's massive, and that's why the leagues are so brilliant this year, and every year, right? Because they're giving Leitrim that chance. But Leitrim beat Louth by 11 points last year in the championship, and you know, they put many a good performance in together, right? Terry Hyland is an excellent manager and has a great track record, so it was no surprise. We played them in a challenge match earlier on the year, and we were very impressed with them, you know. And
what about them impressed you?
Well, what I felt about them at that stage, they were very fit. It was an early season match and they were very fit, and they had a defined system of play, and they were running very, very hard at us, and they caused an awful lot of trouble. And we remember walking off the pitch saying, you know, they're not bad, they're decent, you know, and they have some decent players. I also remember Terry actually saying that, like, Terry's another man that loves coaching. I would have come across Terry years ago when I was coaching Louth 21s. Him and Val Andrews were in charge of Louth seniors at the time. And, you know, he wants to go back and give sort of, as he said, the smaller counties something. He loves coaching, and he said, why not give it a shot? And it's great to see it being paid off. And
like, as a Dublin man, you're probably trying to give something back to a smaller county like Meath as well. But just to talk about Meath, how important, like, you're top of Division 2, 8 points from 10. So that's fantastic. Injury time winner from Barry Dardis against Kildare as well. Huge result against another near rival. How important is it for this team to get back to Croke Park and hopefully pick up a win there?
Well, I would have coached in Meath down through the years with St. Colm Kills and Duleek, so I'd know.
Graham Riley's club, Colm Kills.
Yes, yeah, I know the Meath psyche as such, but I underestimated how big of a GAA county it is. You know, it's only when I'm involved there now, it's a really, really big GAA county, and they love their football. They've got great standing, you know, within the national game, and I think there's a kind of, people want to see Meath back at the top table. Now, there's a lot of work to go, but they're getting their structures really, really, really good under Seamus Kenny. They have a sort of a platform, and they have a structure in place. They've won the last two under-17s Leinster competitions, were beaten in this year's under-17 All-Ireland. So they're doing a lot right. But the most important thing is what I notice about them is they want to be there. They want to be back. They know, like, they're you know, they haven't sort of, you know, reach the heights that they're expected to. So they're really, really knuckling down, and they want it very, very much so. Now, there's 2 matches to go. They're not there yet. They're
Clare and Fermanagh.
Clare and Fermanagh, yeah. But look, from my point of view, involved there with them is, I would kind of look at the performance the other day and wouldn't be happy with aspects of it. So we have to keep working at it, and that's what we'd be kind of drilling into them. Like, nobody's anywhere up to Division 1 or in Croke Park yet. There's 2 matches to go. And I know it's boring, but we have to take 1 match at a time.
What are those work-ons?
Obviously, we kicked about 16 or 17 wide, should I say. See, what a lot of people don't understand, it's very hard to replicate the pressure that like the Kildare and Armagh bring to you in training. So where you're training and everything's going over the bar and it looks great, right? It's brilliant until you get on to the playing field, and that pressures that the other teams bring, it's very hard to replicate that.
Well, that's because you're playing your 1 to 15 against number 16 to 30 in the county, whereas then you're coming up against 1 to 15 from another county. And
that's true, yeah. And the thing about it is like you're always looking to improve, and like we base an awful lot of our kind of like we base everything on performance, you know. So again, we lost to Donegal, and we played very, very well for 63 minutes. So where that defeat would normally knock the stuffing out of a lot of teams in terms of confidence, we could go to the players and say, look, you played very well for 63 minutes. So we need to put that back together. And that's all we work on, that's all we focus on. Like, we don't talk about winning this or winning that. It's about putting the performance together.
Any concerns about getting to Division 1 too quickly in the development of this team? Because it was something that Liam Kearns talked about last year. Missing probably 10 players at the moment, like over the past couple of games, maybe unhappy with a decision or two. He was worried about going up to Division 1 too soon and getting annihilated. And even if you look at them this year, because of all those missed players, 3 points after 5 games, in relegation trouble as well. So for Meath, is there any concern about a dent of confidence if you go up to Division 1 and it doesn't work out?
I'm going to be really boring here now and say, we haven't even spoken about going to Division 1.
Yeah. Right,
and I'll tell you why, because last year they needed to beat Louth in the replayed match from the bad weather to stay up. Longford beat Meath in the championship last year, so they haven't even talked about it. Right, what they've talked about really is just kind of getting the consistency of performance.
I see. Ross Munnelly, quick mention about him. He played his 100th league game for Laois at the weekend as well. Kicked a couple of lovely points as well. Your sons would know him as well. You were telling me.
I was, yeah. My eldest son Ross is on the Louth panel, and as a Dara is captain of the Louth Miners last year, and we had them in the DCU summer camp for years, and they were coached by Ross Munnelly there, so they would know Ross now. When my son Ross played Laois there, he was kind of looking at him and saying, imagine you coached me all them years ago, you know. So it's great to see, and it's a credit. But we always said this as coaches, and when I would talk to fellow coaches, like your fitness goes, okay, and maybe your bravery goes and stuff like that, but your skill set never goes. So if you're a good player like Ross Munnelly is, that skill set never abandons you. He'll always be able to play football, but he mightn't have the conditioning to play at the highest level, but he'll always be able to play football because he's a good player.
Now, we talked about Tipperary being down towards the bottom end of Division 2 at the moment. Cork are down there as well. They finally got a win against Tipperary at the weekend. It was the first competitive win for 280 days. Now, you've experienced Cork up close with me this year as well. How crucial is that win?
Well, a couple of things. I was just saying it on there. I thought Cork were very good the day we played them, and there's no doubt Cork have brilliant footballers. Like Rory Dean was excellent, right? They had Mark Collins, and they brought in that young player, I think was Poulter, and he cost us fierce trouble.
Sean Poulter,
yeah, cost us fierce trouble. So you could see straight away they had great players, and then they had Kerrigan playing as well. So they had really some good players. Now, I took away from it that they were trying to work on a system, and when you're trying to introduce a new system, there's a kind of little bit of sort of finding their feet. Jason Ryan's in there helping them out now, so again he'd be well used to kind of coaching different strategies and whatever, and I could see a definite strategy to what they were trying to play, except they weren't getting it over the line. So when that clicks, it was inevitable that they were going to get a result. So I mean, you know, that'll give them a big confidence beating Tipperary. But the other thing about this National League, Shane, is that you're playing 7 matches in 9 weeks. So if you lose a key player or 2 key players, like, they're going to miss 3 or 4 matches, and that's going to change the dimensions of a team. Like, you only have to look at Tipperary, the players that they've lost through this campaign.
Donegal and Armagh to come for Cork, they're up against it to avoid relegation, aren't they?
Oh, they are, yeah. But at least they've a chance, and that's all you want. And it's the same with us, right? Again, without boring, like, all we wanted to do was put ourselves in position, and now all Cork want to do is put themselves in a position to have a chance, and they have a chance.
Just looking at who I would consider to be the player of the weekend, it's hard to avoid looking at Peter Hart. I think it was 1-3 he scored in their win as well. I think we're going to have to announce him as player of the week. I hope we've got the image coming up. There he is. He's our GOAT of the week this week. Fantastic performance from him. But actually, have you been impressed with Tyrone? Because they started poorly and probably should have lost 3 in a row, only for Roscommon had a chance to kick a free. Alton Harney probably gifted that back away by you know.
Well, are they doing a Cork, or just in Division 1 in terms of working on a system, in terms of working on something a little bit new?
I think so, right? And look, you don't become a bad team overnight. Like, they were in the All-Ireland final, and deservedly so, last year. So I would imagine, right, they might have changed their kind of periodisation in terms of not coming back too early, or they probably done a little bit more fitness work in terms of blocks, and now they're only really getting to the nitty-gritty of the football. Like, it's the kind of moving weeks now, coming up to week 4 and 5 in the league, is where teams kind of begin to show their teeth and get their best teams out. So again, it's no surprise that Tyrone have kind of turned the corner, like they're a top side. And again, they're looking for young players, and they're looking for new players too, and they're trying a few new players as well. So it takes time to settle.
Galway played Mayo at the weekend, and it just shows Kevin Walsh really knows how to beat this Mayo team. He played them twice as Sligo manager in the Connacht Championship. He won one of those two. Hasn't lost to them in league or championship with Galway. 7th straight win over Mayo as well. So he really does know how to beat them. What is it?
Well, I think, right, and I see this sometimes where I am now at the minute. Like, Kevin Walsh as a player was an excellent player, and probably was used to beating Mayo as a player.
Yeah.
So he's instilling that into his team, right? And he's talking about when he played and what he brought to the table in order to beat Mayo. So it's no surprise that you can see that running through. That was an interesting game, I felt, and it was sort of contrasting systems. And I was just kind of surprised about Mayo's decision making in terms of shooting, their shot selection.
As in wild shots from the 45 in that wind.
Yeah, crazy stuff, you know. Yeah. Like, and surprised at that, because if that was young players doing that, you can kind of write that off and say, look, he's learning and he has to experience this before he can develop. But it wasn't always their young players; it was players that have been playing around a while.
John Fogarty suggested here last week from the Irish Examiner that some players have hung on too long there. You're probably not going to say it, confirm that.
No, I wouldn't think that, because like they're excellent players, right? But I think what they're doing is, you know, they're always this kind of last chance saloon hanging over them, right?
Yeah.
I think there might be an element of frustration. They're expecting, because James Horne's back with them, and they're expecting that things are just going to happen. But it doesn't work that way. It has to be done in the training field, Sheahan, for it to develop, you know.
There's every chance that this doesn't go down to the wire for Mayo last year, which automatically means it's a better league campaign than they had last year when McLaughlin saved them by the skin of their teeth in the last day against Donegal.
14 steps.
Exactly. Well, yeah, there was that bit of a Tommaso O'Shea there in that circumstance as well. Like, like, Saturday night has made me kind of reevaluate my theory that Mayo are still a good bit ahead of Galway when it comes to potentially winning an All-Ireland, and that doesn't necessarily boil down to the singular notion that they're a better team than Galway. It just means that on a big day in Croke Park, they're a better place to beat Galway. My belief in that was chipped away a good bit from Saturday night, and I know that's a flaky enough thing to say because of the conditions. Is it a fair enough opinion to have?
Sorry, just to jump in there, that's a very fair point with the conditions, because Mayo were playing against the wind in the first half. We've got an image here to show what the consequences was of that. So this is a Galway kick-out, but we're looking at the Mayo forward line. Sorry, for a Mayo kick-out, that is the Mayo forward line. The goalkeeper has actually come out to the 45 and is further down the pitch than a Mayo player is. That's because the wind was so strong that the Mayo goalkeeper hadn't a chance of getting it out past midfield, and Galway knew we can push the whole team up here. Yeah. Neither team scored from play against the wind, so it just meant that Galway were able to get on top in the first half, and it left Mayo with a massive decline. That's not going to happen in the summer.
No, it's not. But we always have to remember too that Galway are missing some key players as well.
Yeah.
So that's the thing that kind of would be kind of etching at Mayo as well. They'd be disappointed with that. But no, Galway have proven themselves to be a top team, and you know, like I would say, you'll see a development from them. I think I'm seeing signs of them trying to evolve a little from the system that they've had under Paddy Tally now, in terms of they're trying to put a little bit more sort of offensive sort of style to their play.
How so? Was it more ambitious kick passing?
Yeah, I felt myself that look, again, you know, your shot selection comes down to sort of you adapting to what a team is playing against. So I think what Galway were doing against Mayo is they were kind of trying to suck them into sort of certain traps and then going for key pockets of the field. That I didn't see them doing that last year.
So we often talk about Lee Keegan's effect, and if you look over the past number of years, he has been the marker on the key man. He's done it with Dermot Connolly. I remember him doing it in 2016 with Sean Kavanagh, also Michael Quinlivan. So, and even Enda Smith as well against Roscommon. He sent Enda Smith the other way, and he ended up scoring heavily against Roscommon that time a couple of years ago. In this game, James Horan decided that he was going to put Lee Keegan on Shane Walsh. So Kevin Walsh probably saw this coming down the tracks, and he decided to put Shane Walsh full forward. And Shane Walsh got man of the match, but that was for hitting 5 frees and 5 frees only, because there was no man of the match. It was one of those kind of scatty sort of games that you couldn't pick anyone out, probably because of the conditions. Are you getting the most out of Shane Walsh by putting him in full forward? And also, should Mayo have said, this is our best kind of runner from deep, we need to get him out of here, even if it means Shane Walsh is more likely to do damage?
Well, see, that's what it comes down to, as we're going to talk later on about sort of strategies and tactics and things like that, right? We played, when I was with Colm Kills, we played Westport in the All-Ireland final. Yeah. And we kind of figured that Lee Keegan was going to mark Graham Riley. So Graham Riley scored 3 points from him that day. So we had a plan for that as such, you know, and that's what teams do.
But did Keegan do anything in the opposite direction?
No, he didn't score that day, you know, like he caused a bit of trouble running, but I mean, where we positioned Graham kind of left him sort of wondering what to do. Like we kind of played a false 11 as such, right? Where we
what
had
do you mean by that?
Where we played 2 centre forwards, right? Where
was Graham one of those two?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
No, but he was the deep sitting centre forward, if you understand.
Okay.
So again, like he was close enough to goals, caused damage, and yet it was too far for Lee Keegan to make an impact on his late runs, such, you know, that way, because we'd have people to look after him as such. So I think Kevin Walsh did something like that. Look, sometimes what you do is by kind of putting key men back there, you're definitely blunting one of your kind of your arms as such, like, and his armory is coming, you know, breaking the lines. His armory is kind of attack entries, and he's key to that. So again, he kind of robbed himself of that sort of, you know, that attack entry that Lee Keegan would bring. Yeah,
to some degree, it seems like both teams were saying, right, we're going to be almost down a key player.
Yeah,
they're both going to cancel each other out.
And that happens. Like that happens. Like you don't set out to kind of for you to kind of be blunted by making that call, but sometimes it happens that way.
Yeah, Donegal beat Armagh at the weekend as well. No doubt the incident that stood out was the stamp from Stephen Sheridan on Eoin Bon Gallagher. I think we have an image of it just there. And what kind of came to mind is, do we need specific sort of legislation in the GAA whereby something dangerous like that, and I'm not kind of casting any aspersions about Stephen Sheridan as a person and would he do this again or anything like that, and I had someone tweeting me saying, you know, there's a lot of people calling him scumbag, tramp, stuff like this, and that's very different to his nature, which I fully accept. Now I wonder, I mean, it wouldn't be very GAA, but should a player like that, when he does an incident like that, put out something saying, I'll accept whatever is coming my way, any ban coming my way, that's not the way I like to behave, etc., etc., etc. And does that head off all this talk of, you know, casting aspersions on his character? But do we need specific legislation whereby you don't want something dangerous like that getting the same length of a ban as if I simply do a little petulant kick out at you, which would possibly come under similar sort of legislation?
There definitely needs to be a retrospective view of it, and there has to be a retrospective ban. Now, again, I'm not condoning what was done, but like there'll be a lot of rivalry between them two teams, and you know, you're playing in really, your emotions are running wild at times, you know, and again, that stuff I'd say is out of character, and where you don't want to see that in the game. But I think it's very unfair now. It's sort of an aspect of modern life such that, like, he had a trial already via social media, you know, and it's very unfair. It's been just thrown out there. Like, I mean, what I love about the GAA is we've all to go to work the next day. We're all amateurs, and I think it's so unfair when you have the likes of this, you know, all over social media and this, that, and the other. But if there was a retrospective ban, or if there was a view that there will be a ban, like referees can look back in games, or the CCC can look back in games and ban, it would stop that sort of stuff, because you'd be in your mind saying, well, you know, if I get away with that type of stuff here now, I'm not going to get away with it. They'll look back at it, you know. So again, you have to look at that part first, I reckon.
Well, I guess that's kind of part of it as well. That's a hugely important aspect that you talk about. The trial by social media is a danger that we get into that regardless of what happens. But also it's of vital importance, player welfare and protecting the player, and like whether it's stamping, whether it's eye gouging, whatever it may be, is there a retrospective case-by-case possibility here for the GAA to seek out? And I think there definitely is. I think that if that is a 3-game ban, whatever it may be, instead of a 3-week ban, for example, there might be more uniformity in that way. I think it kind of has to come in. Like, I think regardless of the fact that you're amateur or not, there has to be consequences for some violent conduct. I'm not talking about this incident specifically, but incidents in general. If there is a group of people who sit around the table and look at the thing and say that's violent conduct, that needs to be met with more than, or deliberate violent conduct, going out to injure an opponent or whatever it may be, that deserves probably more than 1-game ban, and I think that there needs to be a loophole for that for sure.
Just a quick word then on Nigel Dunn leaving the Offaly panel. John Mahon said the other night that's his decision. If he wasn't enjoying it and wasn't prepared to play for Offaly, that's fine, we accept that. We have many more players who don't want to play for a combination of reasons, not just in Offaly but around the country, and that's a personal choice as well. Nigel put out a tweet as well, sort of clarifying his own situation, saying, the manager was aware of personal issues going on in my life. The text I sent saying I was leaving the panel was a result of weeks of an uncomfortable environment for me personally. I felt isolated and unwelcome in the setup. I appreciate my reputation goes before me, but this is a different scenario. Now that is that. It's best for all involved. Best to look to the players and management for the remainder of the season. Now, when he's saying his reputation, he's left the panel a couple of times before, but feeling unwelcome and isolated, you know, kind of... You know, it's kind of slightly incendiary talk as well. How difficult is it in a management setup to keep all players happy? Because Nigel has been an important player down through the years, came back late because he was playing club with Shamrocks up until December, comes back not really starting. You have Niall McNamee coming back, you have Bernard Allen on the freeze as well. So it's probably tough for him, and he feels like, I'm not really going to see enough game time here.
It is, and his comments had left it hanging there. Yeah. You know, but what that struck to me basically was this. I know it's shocking, right? But like, you need a dedicated in an inter-county system nowadays. You need a dedicated manager, okay, and you need a dedicated coach, and you need your backroom teams or whatever, because like the likes of that has to be handled. And you know, there's a lot of one-on-one meetings. There's a lot of chatting going on there, right? And so, for instance, from my point of view, I've always said this, like, if a player rings me up and say, "Listen, Colm, I'm having trouble with work or in college," and that, I'm sort of insensitive to it. I don't really want to know, but I don't mean to be rude. But if you rang me up and say, "Listen, how can I get my left foot working?" I'd sit with him for hours. Yeah. So I'm a coach now rather than a manager, but that stuff has to be dealt with, and you can't be everything to everybody. So again, a lot of setups, like, you know, would have a sort of liaison officers, and they'd have people for him to go and speak to, whatever, to relay these problems to the manager. In terms of, if he is feeling isolated, if he's feeling he's not getting a fair crack at the whip, if he's feeling this, that and the other, and it should be fed down the line that way to it, you know. But it's a difficult one, and I'm glad I'm not dealing with it.
No doubt. We're going to move over to the tactics board now, but in the meantime, Nathan Murphy was joined on the Saturday panel by Louth star Kieran Byrne, former Laois player Conor Meredith, and Mayo player Cian Hanley to discuss life when you're returning from the AFL back to the GAA.
24 hours away.
Yeah, I would always assume that as well. I guess it came up quite recently with David Clifford, when there was a little bit of speculation, and people in Kerry were getting a little bit frustrated, and there was people saying, like, what's the point in coaching kids at underage level if they're just going to go and turn their back in their county? I would assume most people would look in a town anywhere and in a county and take great pride in Pierce Hanley or any of you three lads, or even Ty Kennelly going over and doing what he did.
Yeah, I think it's a bit different when you're from a bigger county. It's harder for the likes of Kieran Kilkenny, David Clifford, for say, to leave Kerry, to leave Dublin, because they're going to be in contention for All Irons every year. Whereas I feel like it is a bit easier for the people for the likes of Louth, from Laois. We're not going to be competing for these competitions every year, so it definitely is easier for us to leave them things behind. But it's definitely harder for the likes of Clifford now to go and pursue stuff like that.
They're flying now, though. So
yeah, I know. Yeah,
we're actually you came back, is it? Haven't even played. Felt good about life.
Yeah. Now we're top of Division 3, so big game tonight against Carlow. Hopefully we can get over the line.
For anybody who's listening in, who's maybe thinking about this, who's 17, 18, or their parents who are wondering whether they should let their kids go, would you advise them to take the opportunity?
I know, I definitely would.
I definitely would, yeah. 100%. I actually had a guy ring me not so long ago asking me about my kind of experience over there as well, and what it was like over there, and whether kind of he should go or not. Now I think he had his mind made up on it, but I would definitely recommend. You know, it's a once in a lifetime opportunity to go and play a professional sport. Something that you love doing. You're training every day. You're working out. Like, you're making great friendships, and it's great. You're making great. It's a great networking opportunity over there, because if you do stay over there, the likes of say Zach and Pearson boys that are over there like that have made a career for themselves. There's other avenues then outside of AFL that they can go into, the media, or stuff like that. They're interested in that they want to maybe pursue. So I would definitely be recommending it to anybody who asks me. Yeah, definitely.
Is it?
Yeah, that was a really interesting chat that you can get on offtheball.com or on the Off the Ball YouTube or Twitter and Facebook as well. One of the things that stood out when I was listening to the guys the other day is Conor Meredith spoke about how AFL teams, they have set plays for all situations, both attacking and defending, and that's something I want to get into here. But actually, it was interesting, Jurgen Klopp at the weekend, he was asked, after drawing 0-0 with Everton, why weren't you more attacking, why didn't you move players up the field, or whatever it might be, and it was interesting to listen to his response.
It's football that we don't play PlayStation. Eh? Do you think we didn't take enough risks today? Is that what you want to ask? That's really a disappointing question, I have to say, because that means, like, it's so easy. I tell them, boys, we take more risks.
So when you hear that kind of stuff and think of it in a GA context, do you often get accused of you're not taking enough risks, or do you hear about teams not taking enough risks and playing these blankets and all that and kind of roll your eyes?
Yeah. Well, look, again, I get what he's saying about that, right? And it's like, you know, you can just kind of throw a whim at it and have a go at it. You can't really do that, right? Because, you know, if you're setting up an attacking strategy, Shane, a lot of it is really based on how the other team is setting up. So again, what we need to do as coaches, we need to arm the players, right, with enough initiatives that they can figure it out on their own, and doing that in training. So throwing different scenarios at them, but again, so they can adapt on the hoof, because you've coached them to that sort of stuff, to expect the unexpected as such.
Because one of the things that I found interesting in the past was talking to Kevin Kilban about soccer here, and he said that there are different zones all over the field that are numbered, so that if a manager says we're going to work the ball into zone 10, for example, which could be somewhere near the D, I'm not fully sure, that the players all know exactly what's happening because of that zone. And this is something that you're looking at in your coaching as well. I think we have a slide coming up, if you can just talk us through it.
Yeah, well, what I basically do is, like I've done a lot of my coaching. I run the Rage, my home club in Newtown Blues, and what we do is really basically for coaching the players, we've boxed off the pitch into 14 different squares. So you can see it there. So
15 even by your...
Well, we never... Poor old keeper's in there for a reason. Right, so anyway, so if you look at the squares, it's simple, right? You have 2, 3 and 4 all the way up to 15, and they represent each sort of zone of the pitch.
So each zone is the traditional number of the player who will be in that area.
Now, even if we wanted to move that forward, you have half spaces there, but like for today, we're just going to concentrate on them spaces. So what they are really is there's certain behaviours and there's certain attributes that you'd expect players to carry out when they're in each of them zones. Now, that be it attacking or defending. So for instance, if you look at box 15, 12 and 13 and 10, one of the things you'll be saying to your players is no shooting from 15 and 13.
Because they're outside the scoring zone.
They're outside, yeah. So again, the behaviours you'd be giving them would be type of movement. Like for instance, then you'd be asking if players vacate box 14, somebody fills 14 in, right? And again, I was speaking to you earlier on about how Dublin do this, right? Dublin would very seldom have anybody in around box 11, but they've constant players moving in and out of box 11. But that's fine. But we coach kids and we coach children to kick the ball to people, where we should be coaching them to kick the ball into space. So for instance, if box 11 is vacated, you should be looking for a ball delivered into box 11 with a player running into it.
Stride.
Yeah, running into it. Like now, again, to counteract that is teams are going to put a blanket around that. So they're going to put a load of players in that area and fill up that spaces. So you have to come up with strategies to beat that. And again, what my way of thinking behind the likes of that is a thing called layering in coaching. So you have to put different layers into the sort of coaching before you can actually go out and coach the attacking strategy. So
what does that mean?
Well, it basically means we're going to show it here on the
just up on the tactics
board here, where if you have the top part here is your red players are your blanket defence. They've all filled in these key areas. So again, how to beat that is the players, the blue team will swing the ball around, okay, trying to pull them out of position. And
the whole way from side to side? Yeah,
from side to side. Now again,
the ball there as well.
Certain players are nominated on each team to be the swinger, so they have to get the ball and to swing the ball from left to right, and indeed double swing, which would be left to right and back. And all the time you're trying to drag these out. And what you're looking to do basically here is to create what's called 1-on-1s. So again, if you have a 1-on-1, someone bombs through when they see the 1-on-1. Now the flip side of it, because you should always coach both sides, is that the defenders there, when they get back, you get a lot of defenders back into box 5 and 7, and they don't do a whole lot. So there, one of the behaviours you expect them to do is to give no 1-on-1s. So they're shadowing from here to here to here, to not to give them 1-on-1s. So then it becomes a game of stalemate. But you can't just show that in a tactics board to your players and say go out and play that way. You have to kind of try to coach it. So I have a little game here that we play down here, very simple game, small sided games, okay? And the game is simple. We would have a 50-metre square by a 30-metre, or 50-metre rectangle, 50 by 30.
The Reds are playing
widths,
and the Blues are
playing lengths. So the object of this game here is they're all being marked. So if he gets his ball to him, he replaces him at the cone, and he comes out at pace trying to get the ball across. Now the guy that was marking this man that's going to the square now has a decision to make. Does he sit back and invite him to run onto him, or does he go and press him? And that mirrors what happens here, both offensively and defensively. So you have to play that, right, to create them layers, and you have to create what's called an aha moment. So if I'm coaching Shane, I would be coaching Shane through creative question and saying, right, Shane, what should you do now as he's coming off? I'm not telling him what to do. Because if I tell him what to do, I'm creating robotic type players. And what has to happen is Shane has to eventually, when he gets the right answer, he says, aha, And then it's learning, then you know. And that's, you have to create that. So it goes back to what I was saying earlier on in the games. It's very hard to replicate the intensity of games and the decision making and the control of the emotions in training. But you have to try your best to come up with these little scenarios. So that's a simple game, right, to sort of layer the coaching of the blanket defence, if it makes sense.
Can I ask you a question before we move on to different types of defences? You were talking about swing players bringing the ball around, and of course the most obvious player that would come to mind for most people is Kieran Kilkenny, who you managed last year with Castleknock as well. Why is he so good at it? Because some people would see him moving around and hand passing the ball left to right as almost anti-football, but he seems to move the ball with real purpose. So why is he so good at it?
Well, the first thing you have to remember is, right, is Dublin are only swinging the ball because of what's set in front of them. Okay, if they don't set it in front of them, Dublin won't do that. Okay, so this is a strategy, an attacking strategy that they would have worked on, right? So again, Kieran is an excellent player, right? And Kieran is very, very, what I would call an aggressive and a direct player. So he gets the ball and he swings around and he's constantly scanning and directing, and they're trying to get, as you say, the James McCarthy's or whatever coming at pace,
like that,
and they're trying to get the pace. Now they have different strategies for when they run at you, about looping around, but he's the fella that sort of dictates it. Now in the last few battles that Dublin had at Mayo, we spoke about Lee Keegan. Lee Keegan was tasked with the idea of stopping the tagger or stopping the swinger. So he was marking him to stop him and swing the balls. So Dublin counteract that by having a different swinger. Like, they're always one step ahead, so they would have two nominated swingers on the thing. But they're swung with purpose, and it's patience, patience, patience. What happens here is when a blanket defence sets up, they're quite happy to sit there for 90 seconds or 2 minutes, and they're called bouts of activities. And if the ball stays in play for 90 seconds or longer, players get fatigued, and their decision-making goes astray, and their execution and their anticipation of the pass goes missing and goes astray. So that's part of a tactic defensively, keep it for 90 seconds or 2 minutes. But these guys, the Dublin guys, are the best at it. They're so conditioned and fit that they don't tire after that, and they still make the correct decisions under pressure because they've played loads of these games and they're conditioned for that.
Colm, sorry, Sheahan, just one more question on that. When Dublin come up against a defence like that, it's very easy to see why that works, and it's easy to see as well how it's incredibly hard to counteract. And the obvious thing that's thrown out there is like people should do a Mayo and actually abandon over being overly defensive and actually go at Dublin because you can avoid a situation like this. Is there a possibility you can go the other way? Is there something you can do by going even more defensive or with an even more rigid blanket defence that can stop what Dublin do?
There's not really, right? The other, what we have is, the other one is the floating defence, right? And what a floating defence is, only certain teams can do that, and that basically means... So there's a blanket defence and a floating defence. So Dublin would be a floating defence, and what I mean by that is if they're playing Laois and Laois get their kick out away, right, their cornerback's under fierce pressure from the Dublin corner forward, and he's tracking them all the way, so they're tracking all their men, so the defence kind of floats back and forward as that. Now they back themselves to take you on and that, right? So why Mayo can play Dublin that way is because they've the athletes nearly to match them. But what like if you look at all the games Mayo have been close to Dublin, is they've covered the same mileage, they've hit the same sprint distance, they've hit the same sprint numbers as Dublin, okay? But they just haven't got the personnel in terms of numbers to get them over the line, where Dublin have the 5 subs to come on who are equally as good, who's going to make the impacts, you know, that the current players are making. So yeah, the reason why most teams would set up against that way is to sort of try to counteract them. But there's only 1 or 2 teams that can match Dublin, vice versa. But if you go back to last year's All-Ireland final, Tyrone scored the first 4 or 5 points. And after 22 minutes, the score was 4-1. Dublin completely retreated into a blanket, put everyone behind the ball. And they were quite happy for Tyrone to swing the ball and get tired. And once they turned them over, they hit them on the counter. And when they hit them on the counter, they kind of reinstated their dominance by that. So, I mean, they're well equipped to adapt to whatever scenario a team throws at them.
So Tyrone, to win the All-Ireland this year, need to get good at what Dublin do in terms of swinging the ball from left to right.
And they need another 4 or 5 players. And I'm not saying that as a flippant remark. They need about 25 athletes on the team that when 4 or 5 lads tire, they can replace them with just the same impact.
I think we've got some very interesting clips of how Tyrone did learn last year and how they prepared. They watched what Dublin had done against Laois earlier in the championship and prepared for the All-Ireland final. I think we've got a little clip coming up here from Performance Sports. Well, maybe not with the Performance. Can we go back to the Performance Sports little clip first?
Yes, this one, yeah.
Yeah, so we'll just let that play there.
Okay, so what you have here is you have the Dublin players setting a trap for the Laois keeper. So they're trying to direct him into an area of the field So they're covering off all zones. If you notice, Dublin have 4 players nearly in their full forward line. So they're marking zonal, and they're trying to invite the keeper to go a certain direction. And if anyone can remember from this goal, when the ball is kicked out to the Laois number 6 there, just to the left, right, they got 3 players on him, and they rob him of the ball, and Paul Mannion buries the ball in the back of the net. Now that's an attacking strategy for Dublin. It's called the high press, where they put fierce pressure on the high press. Now that was in the Leinster final, and then in the All-Ireland final, right, I actually took a video of Tyrone, right, Niall Morgan kicking the ball out, and Tyrone had anticipated this high press.
Yeah, I think we've got an image of it coming up here as well. We've a couple of stills coming up. First of all, showing the run's been made, how
Yes.
Tyrone got very tight in the middle.
Tyrone gets very, very tight, okay? And again, see where the blue arrow is, that's one midfielder, and if you look at the top of the red box, that's where the other midfielder has ran into that space. So they've totally left that right side free. Now, what is very important about this is they have learned from Laois. So they got really tight, and well, you know, you can't see the video of it, but their runs were very, very hard into different directions. But that midfielder that the blue arrow is pointing to, he uses the referee as sort of a deterrent, and he runs directly at the referee. So the Dublin midfielder can't put a hand on him. So he quickly doubles back into the space here where the red arrow is, and Niall Morgan puts the ball into that zone, and the Tyrone cornerbacks or fullbacks all dash out to support them. Like, that's a fascinating kick out, and it just shows you that teams are adapting on the hoof to what teams are doing. So if you go back to, I think the Leinster final is June, is it July, and then this was early August, because I remember watching this All-Ireland actually, being an aging hipster down in Electric Picnic, right? And what happened was, looking at that, you're just saying, that's fantastic. That was fantastic.
And as a former goalkeeper as well, how crucial is it that what's happening in front of you basically dictates how successful you can be? Well,
it's all right saying that. Okay, we're looking at that and thinking that's fantastic, but that has to be practiced so much on the Gaelic ground. And when I was a goalkeeper, right, you didn't really do that much of practicing the kickouts.
Just hoof it.
You just hoofed it, right? But you always wanted a bit of strategy. But I had a video. I don't know if you got the video of the goalkeeper we were training like years ago in the Blues, my club. We have the under-14s. And here's us trying to coach this. So if you see the right-hand side, see the keeper on the right.
He's sort of nodding where he wants to go.
Yeah, he's trying to find the yellows. So look at this. Look, a fabulous kick out. Right, now, that's all, spend lots and lots of time on the training field practicing that. Now, they're kids practicing that. They're kids having a go at that. So again, that's where we are now at the minute. We're down to coaching young fellas for that. Now, so we're coaching the movement of the attackers there, and we're coaching the keepers. You see the second keeper here now. Again, to kick into space, not directly at the player. So an awful lot of work has to be done on the training ground for Niall Morgan to get that kick out away. So that was just an illustration of strategies to coach that.
So not putting the ball where you are, where you can be marked, but where you want it to be.
Yeah.
And kind of dictate where you have to go. Finally then, let's just have a quick look at tackling as well, because it's, you know, without having the basics of tackling, then you can't just go out on the field and start ripping the ball off the opposition.
Well, again, it comes back to this, and it comes back to this part where I was talking about layering. So again, if you look at the video now that we're showing, right, this is a very early entry.
One of your training sessions.
Yeah, and it's a very early entry tackling exercise. And what we're looking for here is tagging. So the orange players are trying to tag the 4 men at the corner. They can't hit the same fella consecutively, but you're looking at separation speed here. And what I mean by that is the orange man is trying to get away from his marker, and the marker is trying to stop that separation. Now, if he can keep that within a metre, that means the ball into him is difficult to play, and you know the execution that has to be perfect. So when we're looking at blanket defences, you have to give the men the sort of tools to be able to carry out that type of tackling.
Who are the best teams for both tagging and for separation?
Well, Tyrone were definitely one of the best, and I've noticed a huge emphasis on Kerry doing it this year. Yeah. They're definitely, it's a huge strategy of tagging runners, okay, and setting up, remember the boxes we looked at earlier on, they're getting bodies down to them boxes.
Would that be the likes of Jack Barry and Brian Fenton in that league game?
Yeah, never left them alone, didn't want separation, didn't want to give them a metre. You know, even keeping the pressure on them. So they've definitely introduced that to their game. Okay, great stuff from Colm on the tactics board. We've another clip coming up from the Saturday panel as well, with Conor Meredith, Kieran Byrne and Cian Hanley as well, talking about the draw to Australia for Irish players, especially when you're from smaller counties.
How did you find the expectation around your return? Because look, there's an absolute lunacy around Mayo and the amount of attention that is on Mayo, and you come back and you're seen as maybe the final piece of the jigsaw.
Yeah, I mean, again, with that, so I know my body probably better than anyone. So I've just come into a new setup. The physios are getting to know what I'm like. The coaches, again, getting to know what I'm like. So over there, with my knees and groins, I was well managed. So I wasn't doing every training session. So it was me and Luke Hodge, one of the legends of the game, like an all-star. And then Harris Andrews. So the three of us on Tuesday didn't train. So we used to go and do stationary skills, go for a swim, go for a bike, because physically our knees weren't able to do it. Then Thursday we trained, Saturday we played a game. So I'm now coming back saying, guys, you know what, my body, I actually can't train 3 times a week. They're like, well, if you can't train, how can we pick you? I'm like, well, if I train, I'm not going to be in a position to play. Do you know what I mean? So it's been tough with that. And again, I just had surgery just in November gone. So I'm hoping all that knee stuff will be gone once I get over this.
Just a couple of more things just on that, because I think there's a couple of things, and I'm sure people at home will be fascinated by this, is I guess the sort of culture that allows this sort of coaching to take place and to thrive. Is there a danger that when you look at things like, and I know it's an extreme example, is that Ulster schools game at the weekend, that the culture is ultimately stopping the opposition scoring, whereas what you're illustrating here is a culture of unlocking the defence, of actual, it's a positive end product. Is there currently a culture in Gaelic football where that sort of thinking may actually be inhibited a little bit?
Well, I read a quote, I'm not sure where I read it this week, about that coaching is an exercise of empowerment. So again, like, if you really want to be controversial or whatever we can say, them teams are coached, right? So the coach got them to do a job. So in one column, that's good coaching. You get them to do a job. But what the problem is, people don't like what's been coached there. Now, the biggest problem that people would have with that game is because they're not developing the kids' skills. And basically that's what it is now. That's the biggest problem with it. So it was all about winning then. Like, I always ask the question, I tutor for Leinster Council, and I give some coaching courses, and I ask in every county I go to, who won the Under-13 championship this year? And nobody can answer me, right? And the reason they can't answer is because nobody cares. It's about improving players. So again, I would always have a kind of a theory of, you know, you're trying to empower the players that they can adapt to any situation on the field. You're trying to arm them on the training field for what they might face in a match. But you have to have philosophy in coaching, you have to have philosophy in football. Now, I like playing, coming from Dublin, right? I love their expansive style of football. And again, if I wasn't coaching, I'd be a fan of Dublin. I love watching what they're doing. So you're trying to replicate areas of their game plan to yours because that's your philosophy. Like, I'd never send out a team or a player to stop anybody illegally or wrong. I want them to, you know, practice the fine art of tackling and that sort of stuff. So again, I feel if a fella jumps on someone's back and pulls him down, I haven't done him justice because I haven't coached him to coach properly with the near hand and whatnot. So again, coaching is an exercise in empowerment, and people want to express themselves. People want to play football for fun. Like, the first questions I asked all my teams, whatever age, did you enjoy that? You know, and did you enjoy playing that system, and take feedback from them. Now, we are always looking to learn and implement new styles, but it's basically on your philosophy. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of football, you know, from the north that has played with a defensive element, but there's 2 different types of defensive elements. There's a defence to stop you scoring, and there's a defence to get the ball back from you. You know, and people misinterpret that. A lot of what we're doing there is trying to win the ball back from you to counter-attack, and if you counter-attack a team, you have them out of position.
Well, we have a defender of the North on the line at the moment. It's Declan Bogue, journalist and author of This Is Our Year. How are you doing, Declan?
Very good, Sheahan. Can I just say thank you very much to Colm for sending me one of his excellent coaching books, which I said would give a plug sometime, so here we go.
Thanks, Declan.
Declan, what did you make of the Mahara Abbey game, 2 points to 1?
Same as everybody else would have, like, you know, I probably tongue-in-cheek involved in helping out with hurling and camogie in the area here, and I retweeted the tweet just to say that, you know, hurling and camogie training continues every Monday. For, you know, it was like the best advertisement for other sports is to show that action or lack of action. And my sympathies were maybe with the like of the young fella that was sitting at full forward or full back, who would have literally stood still for 50 minutes in that entire game. And if I had been a parent of one of those children, I might have just felt, you know what, come on home, that's a waste of time. Like, why on earth would you want to actually be involved in something like that? Because you're not actually playing football, you're literally just marking space. It's kind of thoroughly depressing. It's the end game of it all. But I do believe, like, even though the Mahara players are moving about and passing the ball, the next step is for a player to literally just drop it and put their foot on it, trap it like soccer, and just let the clock run down. And probably only at that point will the I'm hesitant to say the GAA, because the GAA is a million different things to a million different people, but they will whoever is involved in standing rules and playing, or standing committee on playing rules, will have to actually say, okay, what do we do to stop this? Because this is just beyond what we have ever seen before.
Yeah, Joe Malloy and Kieran Donaghy were talking about it on the evening show earlier in the week, and they had a consensus that it was Mahara, the attacking team, that were basically standing off and just playing the ball among each other, that it was up to them and that they were as much at fault as the defending team. Whereas I would say that the defending team, by not coming out, you are the problem here. What way do you see it?
Yeah, it's as much as either team's fault. Like, I mean, when you got a team that's just not willing to engage in any aspect of the game other than running down the clock, and another team that just are sitting into a defensive shell, well, does it really matter? Apportioning blame to either team doesn't really matter. The fact of it is the game has evolved to the point where this is happening, and that's unacceptable.
What about, just to look at another team that kind of struggled to get up a score, we're talking about 2-1 there. The Donegal Miners beat the Fermanagh Miners 3-15-0. I'm not sure if you were at that game, but how would you reflect on that?
Well, there's a couple of things here. The under-16s, of which my own nephew was playing, and were beaten by Donegal 8-13 to 3 points on the same day. The minors, I wouldn't read too much into it, because you're missing all the St Michael's McCrory Cup players, and really, if there's a nursery in Fermanagh, there is only one grammar school in Fermanagh, and they tend to get the best footballers to come to them for McCrory Cup football. So literally everybody that's good enough to play for the county tends to go through St Michael's. So when they're now into a McCrory Cup final, I would nearly read more into it. Fermanagh can be taken as a special case in those circumstances. You look at Tyrone, and they've got CBS Oma, they've got St Pat's, Dungannon, they have like two couple of, in Mahara Felt, you have two grammar schools in Derry, and so on. So there's just one in Fermanagh, and the health of Fermanagh football can be always better judged by how St Michael's getting on in McCrory Cup.
Okay, that's fair enough.
As for what the other lads do, that's an appalling scoreline, and before development squads became so fashionable and everything like that, we didn't really know about how the relative strengths at that age of any county. It has become much more of a big deal. Under 20s now are taken away from clubs and basically not allowed to train for about 6 months because they're with the under 20 squads, and I don't know, because I know for a fact that the under 16s, they have been on programmes and they have been trained by very skilled ex-county footballers who are experts in their field with strength conditioning and everything else. And I wouldn't say that they've been overworked on the pitch or anything like that, but they are doing what they can. Mm-hmm. And the problem with them is just, there's never been a tradition of underage success in Fermanagh. So there's not a great deal of change, Shane, really. Okay.
Well, it wouldn't be a sports show, and it wouldn't be right unless we got on an Ulster GAA journalist and talked about Brexit. So in the past couple of days on the This Week programme, Jarlath Burns said that the GAA should not remain neutral if there is a unity referendum. You've done a column on it for the Belfast Telegraph. Just to give people a bit of a flavour of the background of this, Jarlath, as he said himself, I'm speaking as just an ordinary GAA member and I don't have any executive role in the GAA. Now, he's a delegate on the Ulster Council of the GAA and he's the former chairman of the Standing Committee on Playing Rules. Now, just to give you a couple of his quotes as well, he said, "The interesting thing is that there's been 36 referenda since the foundation of the state, and while people got very emotionally involved with the last one, the marriage referendum, the termination of pregnancy one, as he put it, the GAA has always steadfastly remained neutral. And in fact, it brought people in and made it very clear whenever they were using GAA grounds to promote one or the other of the perspectives on that referendum. The interesting thing about a referendum on a border poll, the GAA wouldn't be neutral. The GAA's basic aim, it states the association is a national organisation which has as its basic aim the strengthening of the national identity in a 32-county Ireland through the presentation and promotion of Gaelic games. That doesn't make us neutral on the issue of a border poll. It gives us a position on a border poll and a position that I, as a GAA member in a border county, would like to think that from a logical as well as an ideological perspective that the GAA would have a strong position on." Declan, what are your thoughts on that, and can you sum up what your column was about?
It's a lot to unpack there, Sheahan, really. Yeah. So where do you want me to start? There's no doubt there's such a huge level of frustration with how things have gone in the north, right? I'm going to take this right back. The summer of 2016, okay, and the North and the Republic of Ireland both at Euro 2016. The mood among both communities at that time was very buoyant and very optimistic, and both teams were making great progress. And Martin McGuinness had made approaches to Arlene Foster that asking, well, how about I go to a Northern Ireland game with you and you come to a Republic of Ireland game with me? And that was completely knocked out. It was totally refused. It was probably around about that time where relations between the two were just getting so incredibly strained that eventually Stormont was collapsed. It was brought down, and ever since that, you know, the accumulation of various different political acts, like the cutting of an Irish Language Act funding, which was just minuscule amount of money, but it was such bad faith. Brexit, the result, the commentary after it from each side has definitely opened up a little bit of a chasm between communities in the north. Now, I think Jarlath has every right to say what he wants as a run-of-the-mill GAA member, which is the capacity he's speaking about. You know, Jarlath is no longer inner sanctum of the GAA. For whatever reason or whatever way, you know, people align themselves or jockey for position for these jobs. He's just not speaking on behalf of, say, the half dozen people who really rule the GAA anymore. That's not to say that that won't change for him. So he's talking on his own behalf, and Joe Bradley also came into the debate and he said what he said, and I just wonder sometimes, is that down to as much frustration with the DUP, who don't really reflect the values, who certainly don't reflect the values of the majority in the north, who voted to remain in the Brexit referendum. And I wonder, is this idea that the GAA should get behind the idea of Irish unity in a border poll just down to as much as frustration with the DUP as it is they see a worthy project to get behind for Irish unity? Do
you think that it's reflective of the mood of Catholics in Ireland, in Northern Ireland, I suppose, more so than anything? Do you think it's reflective of the mood across the 32 counties that the GAA should do this, that they should get behind a 32 county Ireland?
That is a really tricky one. When you say, when Jarlath or Joe says that, you know, about the basic game, and it's you have the official guide, you open it up, and the point number 1 in the index is the name of the association is the Gaelic Athletic Association. Point 1.2 is about noting the strength and the aims and objectives of the 32 county Ireland, right?
Yeah.
And I just wonder sometimes, like, I'm involved in coaching hurling in Camogie, and I help out with the local senior team here, and I would, and I said it in the piece, I really think that 99% of those GAA members wouldn't be quite aware of that line in it as a mission statement, if you want.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you tell me, Sheahan, in Cuala hurlers, like, how many do you think would be able to quote that line accurately or know much about it?
Maybe there's a history buff in there somewhere, but I would say the vast majority are unaware of it.
Yeah, and that's the way it is, I think, for most players. Most players, young lads in their 20s and all, and they're interested and they're engaged with the sports, and they're all about, like, you know, they're training 3 times a week, and then they've been asked to do a wee bit of strength condition, maybe 1 or 2 nights after that, and the rest of the time is spent being a young fella, being a young woman, growing up and looking after all your other things. And history buffs are few and far between at that age. So that's my own feeling on it, is that it is an obscure part of the association that not a great deal know about it, but to actually say we need to take a political position because this here is written down in the official guide is, my own personal opinion, doesn't come into it. That's because the truth of the matter is the GAA will never take a position on this. I mean, they're right now, when it comes to taking positions on anything, whether it be Liam Miller, whether it be hosting a game in Newbridge, whether it be allowing the Dubs to play 2 games in the Super 8s in Croke Park, they are terrified of expressing an opinion, and they are awful at dealing with fallouts. So they will certainly not put themselves into a position of saying, yes, we want to go for Irish unity. What do you think? Am I completely wrong? What does Colm think there, for example? You know, he's another man living on the other side of the border.
Yeah, Colm, what do you think of it? Because as well, like I'm from Tipperary, you're from Kerry. Yeah. I'd say in a lot of ways we feel completely insulated from this. It almost feels like this isn't our issue as well. And I mean, I know how that might sound. It might sound like you don't care. But we're so far away from it geographically, I feel at times that it feels like it's not our issue.
I just want to ask Declan first, is that the Meath team behind him? And the right hand side? Croke Park, no?
Do you know what? For the crack, hold on.
Here he comes with the picture.
That's the Fermanagh senior hurling team.
Okay.
Norrie Maher winners in 2015.
That's glorious.
Great picture.
You're a good hurling man under it all, aren't you, Declan?
That's the only time you're going to see that on the radio, or because we watch things on the radio now. I never knew what you looked like, Sheahan, before now.
Colm, do you want to take him up on that point as well?
Well, look, I don't think you can get away from the fact that the GAA is a political organisation. So they have to give a view one way or the other. And that was my take on it. Like, I mean, you can't go too far from the way the GAA was formed and whatnot. And it is, you can't get away, as I said, it's a political organisation.
But are you disenfranchising people that aren't from the Catholic background, that aren't necessarily into 32 County Ireland? For example, a couple of the Monaghan footballers, and I think you did an interview with them, Declan, around Christmas time, the Wiley brothers, Drew and Ryan Wiley. Is that disenfranchising people like that come from a different background? Because not everyone is Catholic in Ireland.
Yes, and not everyone who is Protestant is a unionist either.
Exactly.
It's multi-layered. I mean, you know, around the border areas, there are, right, I'm totally generalising here, but you have a history of players in Leitrim and Donegal and Cavan and Monaghan who have played county football who are Protestants. And that was up until very recently in Donegal and is the current situation in Monaghan, and has been a long tradition in Leitrim, like, you know, where possibly avenues of entertainment might be limited enough, so therefore you had a good bit of crossover. The point of it is, along the border itself would be much more delicate, and you're never going to get a definitive answer as X amount of Protestants play for this GAA club. But anecdotally, I would have heard tell of quite a lot of, you know, that happening. The Moy team that won the All-Ireland Intermediate had a couple of Protestants that were in their squad. But would it disenfranchise people? You don't know until you ask the question. Does it run a risk of creating a feeling that they are? It possibly does. Do you want that then to become an area of conflict within your club? You've got to be very careful.
As well, there's one other thing that you brought up in your column as well. You were talking about the dichotomy of the GAA's political dilemma, and within the article you brought up in 2016 that former GAA president Eoin O'Farrell, he talked about the possibility of removing the Irish anthem and the flags at GAA venues, saying it would be time to look at it in our own island as well as abroad as well.
That's right. That was a famous interview at the All-Stars tour in Dubai. He had been asked the question that was in relation to foreign units, like, say, for example, in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, that, you know, what is the point in having the Irish national anthem played before games here, or the flags? And he was unprovoked, or he wasn't really being asked about it at home. He brought it into the equation about, you know, maybe it's something we have to look at home, which was a huge surprise to the people there. But it was thought among perhaps some of the journalists, at least, that, you know, this was a kite flying exercise. This was someone putting an idea up there and quickly disowned himself of the opinion after.
Well, it's quite different than what Burns is coming out with as well. So it just shows, what I'm starting to wonder is, who is Burns speaking for when he says that the GAA should get behind a unity referendum if it comes to it? That's
it. I mean, but as Jarlath notes in his quotes, he is only speaking on behalf of himself.
Yeah.
Like, he is not, he no longer is a member. He didn't head up any, he hasn't headed up any committees for a time. And in some ways, like, you know, when they formed the new Standing Committee on Playing Rules, they didn't actually go back to Jarlath, who had chaired the previous one, and ask him, look, how does this work, or what are the parameters, or what are the width of the things that we can get through. Like, they just decided they weren't going to ask his opinion on anything, which I thought was remarkable.
Is it your view, Declan, that the GAA should perhaps steer clear of political motions for the foreseeable future, or is this just this particular issue which you feel they should perhaps take a step back from?
But they haven't, Eoin. I mean, it's been so long. Like, when was the last time that you did hear them actually take a line on a political issue? Like, you know, so my feelings, Jarlath's feelings.
David Goff stopped wearing the wristband, which was in support of the gay marriage referendum. I suppose maybe that's something that's happened in recent times.
Well, I guess a better question, Declan, should be the GAA as a whole. Should they be more political then? Should their role as a political organisation within Ireland be enhanced? Should they be doing more on their own back? Or should they, as you say, in your own view, continue the way they've been going, which is not doing very much?
That is such... that is worthy of its own show. Like, you know, if you want to talk about it, should they be more involved? I mean, they are the great community drivers of Ireland. Like, I mean, I was actually discussing the idea of this column with another, a great friend of mine, who said that, you know, he talked about this as sort of, he felt that this was version into nationalism, and, you know, Ireland really wasn't even a nation. It was a collection of chieftains and tribes until the British came over. And then he says, now what you have is just a collection of GAA clubs, and that's Ireland, you know. Yeah. So in some ways, the community work that Ireland has done, facilities they have created in rural parts of Ireland, all that, like, they are the biggest sort of community driver in Ireland anyway. Should they have a voice politically? God knows. I'd love to have a hard and fast opinion on it, but I don't know if that would suit everyone.
Probably too many disparate views within the association to ever decide. You know,
That's what I mean.
They can't even decide a fixture calendar. How on earth are they going to decide their political views collectively? I just couldn't see it happening. A final question for you, Declan, and before we go, if you have any further thoughts on that, feel free to throw them in. But just, you're up covering the counties in Ulster more often than not, I'm assuming. Is there any team that particularly looks like a bolter to you this year?
Good question. No, I'd say what you're seeing in front is what you're going to see in the summer. People were getting very carried away with Tyrone there, for example, and their struggles in getting scores from play over the first two games against Mayo and Kerry. But, you know, I'd heard a whisper that, you know, perhaps the team holiday in Thailand had set them back when they went to do their fitness test and so on. They were about 6 weeks behind where they had been the previous year, because there's all these things now recorded and kept in a file and all the rest. And that's why, you know, when balls were being played up to the full forward line, be it Lee Brennan or Darren McCurry, normally you would have seen him, Matty Donnelly and Tiernan McCann and so on, bombing forward off the shoulder and support and getting the scores, and that just wasn't happening. Like, the whole thing was very sort of dead and lackluster, and perhaps they were maybe doing a lot of the pre-season training in January and February. People are raving about Fermanagh, and rightly so, for all sorts of reasons, low playing population and all the rest, but they're doing an incredible job for a team that actually lost their highest scorer from last year, and also possibly their best forward behind that is Tomás Corrigan. They're doing remarkably well. Like, if they were to win promotion to Division 1, they'll have done it. They'll have done it. And it would have to be ranked as the coaching job of the year by Rory Gallagher. But that's not to say that they're going to get a positive result when Donegal come to Brewster Park in the championship.
That's brilliant stuff, Declan. Thanks for joining us. We might get you on the hurling show to talk about the Fermanagh hurlers sooner rather than later.
This is me.
You can make it.
Hurling, man.
All right. Thanks very much, Declan. Just one final point before we finish up there, Colm. You actually did play for Dublin at one stage. You are a Dublin native, Dwyer's native as well. You did play for Dublin. You were disappointed you weren't kept on. Can you just tell us about that quickly?
Well, it was 1993, a long time ago. Donegal were the reigning All-Ireland champions, and I think it was an opening of a pitch somewhere, early March or something the following year, and I was brought as sub-goalkeeper, and they used all their subs, and a fella got injured, and I was asked to go on, and I scored a point. And I remember going back to Bring that night and was delighted and was looking to tell everybody, and I really felt I'd get another go after that, but I never did.
Sadly not, sadly not. Well, Colm, thanks very much for joining us. And remember, you can pick up Colm's book, Gaelic Football, Game-Based Training Activities. We'll be back with the hurling show tomorrow from 3 p.m. and back again with the Gaelic Football show at 12:30 next week on YouTube, Facebook and offtheball.com and Twitter, of course, as well. Thanks for joining us as well, Eoin.
Thank you, Shane.
We'll see you all next week.